Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today, those that have managed to make it. Obviously, this is a very different NRF to those that we're normally used to. But thank you for taking the time to come and listen to myself and Eva today. We did have a third co-presenter, David, who unfortunately can't join us today due to COVID-related challenges, but we wish him well and we hope that he makes a good recovery. We're going to talk to you today about some of the challenges around omnichannel returns and claims fraud, around goods not arriving or goods being damaged, and people taking advantage of the more liberal policies that retailers are providing in those areas to try and make the experience of shopping online best for customer. Myself, I'm from Appriss Retail. I look after all of our product strategy, and we've been very lucky to be working with Dick's Sporting Goods for a number of years in various areas about trying to reduce fraud and risk inside their business. And very recently, we've been working closely with Eva's team, delivering solutions around looking at the risks around claims and around people who are fraudulently trying to receive extra product by saying that it never arrived or is damaged and things of that nature. So we want to take you on a little bit of a journey today. First of all, tell you a little bit about Appriss Retail and about what we're doing in this space, then give you some very real-world examples, and then summarize and tell you a little bit of the science behind the covers about how we do some of these things. Everything that we deliver from Appriss Retail is based on artificial intelligence, and I know you'll hear that on every single stand that you work around today. But we really do use artificial intelligence to try and spot these anomalies and these data points within millions or billions of pieces of data. So I'll start with something that we all know, and we're all very, very aware of this, is that e-commerce growth went crazy over the last couple of years. Obviously, when the pandemic hit in 2020, there was a huge acceleration to purchasing goods online because, quite frankly, a lot of physical stores were closed. But what we've really seen as that trend continue over time is that 2021 also kept those elevated levels of e-commerce shopping, and we really haven't dropped back down to 2019 levels. So it really was sort of a one-off event of acceleration, this movement to e-commerce. And a lot of omnichannel retailers have had to really react to that very quickly, changing systems, changing business processes to be able to deliver quality experiences to their customers. And when we're doing that, returns and adjustments and what to do when things go wrong has become a bigger area of focus. It's not a surprise for most of you to understand that return rates for online purchases are roughly double that of brick and mortar purchases. We all shop online. We all know you buy that piece of clothing or that pair of shoes that don't quite fit or it's not quite the right material and you want to send it back. And the retailers want to make it easy for you. They want to make it easy to have a great experience shopping with them. But with that ease, or with that ability to make it easier for customers, introduces risk. There's always bad actors that want to game those processes, try and find the holes, and therefore add extra cost to a retailer's business. And that cost is growing. The absolute number of returns is growing, which means the absolute number of claims based on returns and shipments of that nature are also growing as well. So for what was once seen as a sort of cost of doing business, it's now become significantly impactful to the bottom line of the retailers, to the last point that you can see on this slide, which is saying this driving of e-commerce growth is actually causing some retailers to understand that their omnichannel e-commerce side of their business is less profitable than their brick and mortar side of the business because of the costs incurred around this part of the process. And if you couple that with this migration from brick and mortar to e-commerce, it's actually showing retailers that may be growing in their top line but declining in their bottom line because of these excessive costs about being able to drive their e-commerce business. So what are some of those costs? What are some of those challenges? Well, we're seeing excessive product over-ordering. I don't know which color I like, therefore I'll order 4 colors and I'll see which one I want and send the other 3 back, which drives needless outbound shipping and handling costs from the retailer. Everybody expects free delivery these days and free returns, so there's an implied cost there from the retailer. The return shipping for those items you don't want, that's another cost being borne from the retailer. Lost in transit, theft and damage, of which we're going to hear a lot about today from Eva as she goes through these examples. There's a level of legitimacy around that, but there's also a level of fraud and abuse in that area. If my goods don't arrive and I call up the retailer and say my goods didn't arrive, what happens? People say, oh, we'll just send you another one. Okay, you just sent me another $200 pair of shoes. Can I do that for everything? Can I do that for everything that comes delivered to my house? And you'll see people that have got that sort of mindset starting to game these parts of the systems. And finally, the environmental and sustainability challenges of these goods. The carbon footprint of moving so much product backwards and forwards, telling people to destroy product rather than shipping it back just because it's too expensive to do so, really has an environmental impact. And we're seeing many customers these days being very focused on, is the retailer that I'm working with acting in an environmentally efficient and sustainable way? So what can we do about that? Well, as seems to be the answer to everything these days, artificial intelligence can help us in this area to solve some of these challenges. What we can help to do is we can help to curate the customer experience to make sure that we're providing a service that's best for customer and best for retailer. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And one of the areas that we can do that is by identifying and addressing fraud in real time, which is what you'll hear about today, to be able to reduce that cost footprint from a retailer's perspective and enable the retailer to keep those very open and liberal policies for the customer to make it easy for the legitimate customer. So as Appriss Retail, we've created a product called Engage. Engage is our omnichannel recommendations engine. It's an AI-based engine which curates various parts of the customer journey to help guide and change consumer behavior to drive omnichannel profits. What does that mean? Well, really, there's 4 areas in which we look at things here. First, about stopping fraud and abuse as it's occurring in real time, and that's what we're going to focus the majority of the presentation on today. Secondly, looking at how do we recoup or regenerate revenue for a retailer. If somebody's returning an item, a refund from our perspective is the worst type of return. How do we embrace that customer, understand their buying trends, and help them rebuy something else that's going to be good for them because they wanted to buy something, and it's going to be good for the retailer to drive incremental revenue. We want to reduce overall costs for a retailer. How do we reduce things like shipping costs and handling costs for goods? And finally, we talked earlier about sustainability, something that's becoming more and more of a focus. And almost every retailer we talk to today has got some level of steering wheel control at the board level to say how are they going to act more sustainably as a business. So to get into the details of what we're going to really talk about is we're going to talk about risk reduction in this area of customer appeasements, which is that something went wrong with my order, the goods that I ordered online either didn't arrive, they arrived damaged, and how do I deal with that? And what are the challenges that a retailer has trying to find that delicate line between being great for customers that are good and for making sure they can fix that situation in a fast way, in an efficient way, in a way that retains the loyalty of the customer, but without being too open and too liberal and being taken for a ride, for want of a better term, by the bad actors and the fraudsters that are out there. So I'm going to hand over to Eva, who's going to take you through some of the details.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Eva Sciulli. I'm a senior product manager at Dick's Sporting Goods. Thank you all for coming. A few minutes ago, we thought there would be 3. So I appreciate you coming. So I have responsibilities for profit protection technologies at Dick's Sporting Goods for our e-commerce space. And prior to working with the digital fraud team that I work now, I worked about 6 years with our customer service group. So really, leading up to today, really started about a little over 6 years ago with me sitting in a call center, listening to customer contacts, sidejacking with the agents, which if you haven't done, I really recommend that you do that. It's the best way to get a crash course of any business. So what we did in working with the customer service team is to really get a really good education in what was the experience that our athletes were having with our agents. We got to see what problems our athletes were facing, and we also got to see what our agents were having issues with and understanding and solving. So that's where we really began to find trends in this. I think I missed a slide. So that's where we really began to see trends. And it was really just reading chat transcripts, listening to calls, catching pieces of information that we could start to stitch together, but we couldn't hold on to. It was almost like the word at the tip of your tongue, and then it was gone. So fast forward to today, working with the new digital fraud team that we started a few years ago, we were able to put some dedicated focus towards appeasement abuse within customer service. Excuse me. So now one of the issues that we face in customer service is that we have to trust that you are who you say you are when you contact us. Of course, when you call or you chat with us, we're doing verification to the order, to the account, as is appropriate. But we're also not going into those conversations assuming that you are potentially 10 other people as well. So we learned that our agents cannot easily identify the risk level associated with our athletes' requests. And so this is because they couldn't see all the way that the fraudsters were presenting themselves to us. And really, that's by design. They don't want us to know who they are. They want to hide who they really are. They want to appear as many unrelated customers as possible. And they do that in order to increase their odds of getting an appeasement from an agent. Nope, wrong side, sorry. Now, our agents are really good at taking care of our customers, and it's what we've hired them to do. But they're not fraud investigators. They aren't trained or skilled at identifying and catching fraud. They're trained to solve your issue and not put you into a queue where at some point someone who has a higher permission or might be able to dig deeper into the problem, and then they make a decision which probably is going to be to appease you anyway, and all of the expense that occurs with that. So we really train and empower our agents to take care of the customer when you call. So that's their job. But it's very hard for them to identify this. So we started looking at how we can help them. So they need the ability to easily understand the eligibility of the request that's being asked of them. Now, we all know that e-commerce fraud is changing and becoming increasingly complex. People aren't always who they say they are. Probably not just in e-commerce, but in our case, we could see signs of the athletes where we might be able to stitch together a first name or a last name here. Maybe they used a similar email address. Maybe they were Robert and then Rob and then Bob. But it was nothing that we could really stitch together and to be able to find a real concrete way to identify all the ways that these fraudsters were presenting themselves to us. Some use multiple names and email addresses, and it's those tactics that make it extremely challenging for an agent to see the interconnections of these fraudsters and to really understand who they were speaking with. So we talk a lot about appeasements. At Dick's Sporting Goods, appeasements are tools that our agents can use to help satisfy or compensate one of our athletes when we've fallen down on our promise to them. So when you think about how we're approaching what appeasements are and what they're for, we're really coming at it from a good intended place. We're trying to take care of our customers. So the appeasements that we're going to be talking about today are the Wizmo appeasements, or where is my order? So this is where a customer calls in or chats with us that they didn't receive their package. They're saying that it wasn't delivered, or that a porch pirate, or maybe it's the wrong item or the wrong color or the wrong size, but they have something that they want us to resolve for them. In that case, they're essentially requesting some compensation from us. And from the agent's perspective, they have the ability to reship the item at no cost, to issue a refund, to offer some other discount for a future purchase. And these are some of the tools that they have available to them. Now, when they're dealing with someone who is intentionally trying to disguise who they are, it's really challenging for them to understand the complexities of who they're dealing with. So part of that is that they can't understand how often you have contacted us. They can't understand how many times you've asked for a reship, because you appear as if you're many different people. When they're just looking at that one account, you may not have contacted us at all. So that really limits the agent's ability to understand when someone is trying to take advantage of our goodwill. So the agent is going to side with the customer, and they're going to take care of them the way they've been trained to do. So the team really observing these things and watching this and spending time with the customer service, we came up with some core beliefs. So like, we believe that we need to perform a risk evaluation to determine eligibility of an appeasement, and that doing so is going to provide a greater profit protection. But we also believe that we need to provide some sort of indicator that's going to give the agent some guidance. And that's going to help the agent to understand with our customer their eligibility of the request. So really taking it out of their investigative hands, doing that investigation behind the scenes and providing it to them as they're looking at the account or the order for the customer. So we, as Nathan said, we have an existing relationship with Appriss where we're using the Engage in our stores for understanding eligibility of returns. And it's really there where we said, let's see, they're very similar cases to us, and we wanted to see if they could apply that same type of logic, but to our appeasement problem. So we wanted to know, if that was even possible. So we met with the team and with David, and we began a proof of concept. And that proof of concept, we learned very quickly that, yes, we very much could use that solution to begin to understand the interconnections of these fraudulent athletes and really understand what they were hiding so well. So I'm going to share a couple of examples from the proof of concept. So the first one is going to be an individual, and the second one will be what we call a group, or a group of individuals. So for this example, we're looking at a single fraudster that in a 12-month period received 119 adjusted transactions. And we learned that they had some pretty complex ways of hiding themselves. And when you see these things, you understand why an agent was really not able to understand it. So they used 105 different email addresses, 113 different customer IDs, so Dick's Sporting Goods accounts. And their adjustments were primarily on 2 shoe styles. So we learned we had an enthusiastic sneakerhead on our hands, and it was working very hard to game the system to get additional money off of their orders for their resale purposes. In this next example, this was probably one of my favorite CSI type slides. This example is of a group. So we believe this not to be one individual, but I don't want to use the term reseller, but a group that is purchasing things for obviously not their personal use. So for this customer, we'll call this group, they had 324 adjusted transactions in the past 12 months. They used 123 different email addresses, 145 different customer IDs, and 26 different billing and shipping addresses. So when you look at this diagram, what's striking to me is that it's just a wonderful video to show, a visual to show why the agent could never see this. There's no way that an agent is going to be able to, talking to that one customer on the phone, looking at their one order, to see all of these interconnections. This is where they needed help. So, they're on the phone, they're talking to this one customer, they're looking at this one order with this one account, and they might see one, maybe two appeasements for that one account. So when they're calling again, they're likely to offer it to them. And this is where, this is how they're taking advantage of that situation. So with them not easily able to understand the size of the puzzle, they're really probably talking to one of these dots, is what they're thinking. And they're not realizing the totality of the situation. And I apologize. So as part of the implementation of this new process, the way we're thinking about it is we have to introduce a couple of concepts to the agents. So the first one is the concept of eligibility. And so they have their set of rules that they're used to following, and they're guided through with their training. But what we need to do is to help them understand, like, not everyone is eligible for what they're asking for. And that's really a new concept to customer service agents at Dick's Sporting Goods. And then the way that we're going to do that is we're going to provide them guidance. So they're going to enter in the request, and then they're going to get the guidance back, kind of in a red, yellow, green type of approach. So we don't want to take the decisions completely out of their hands. We want to give them guidance to understand, have a better understanding of who they might be dealing with, and that this person is likely to have been appeased, or maybe they haven't in the past. And we'll see in some of these upcoming slides where it's really a very small percentage of folks who are the fraudsters in our business, but the ones who are, the fraudsters are highly effective in what they're doing. All right, Nathan.
Sure.
There you are.
Thanks, Eva. So as you can see, as Eva very eloquently said there, these sorts of networks of behavior are impossible for a human being to digest in the time that it takes for somebody to be on a telephone call to have to make a decision. And that really is where this artificial intelligence idea comes in here, to be able to drive all of that knowledge and that understanding and deliver it back to a call center operative with some guidance of what do you need to do, to take that challenge out of their hand. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of, well, how big is this problem? What is the magnitude of this issue? How much of this is going on? And what's normal behavior versus abnormal behavior? Clearly, if we want to stop the fraudsters, they are abnormal in their behavior, but what does that really mean? Well, we've worked with DSG on pulling together the last 1 year's worth of their post-order adjustment and reshipment data to really start to model and understand what does bad behavior look like. And there are many different types of fraud that can occur in e-commerce transactions, but we really filtered it down to the three here that you see highlighted in green, which is the product didn't arrive, the item was damaged when it turned up, or that the item was late when it arrived at my house. We've probably all experienced these in our own shopping in perfectly legitimate ways. And the reality of the fact is that adjustments are normal business. This is the overview of that year. And you're looking at a total of 500,000 adjustments that are made for legitimate and illegitimate reasons. Things do go wrong, and we want to make sure that we can cater for those, but then highlight the bad actors and be able to filter them out of this number. It's not surprising that you see a lot of these adjustments peak around peak trading periods. Supply chains are stressed. Delivery capabilities are stressed, pickers are stressed, seasonal workers, things of that nature, all add into the challenge of this problem. But the underpinning thing is, how do you start identifying this, really comes from this linking idea that we talked about earlier and be able to create that spider graph that you saw on the screen. And it's about trying to outwit those fraudsters. If people are creating multiple accounts, different shipping addresses, different shipping names, slight variations on them, skipping between different IP addresses when they're creating orders, using different tenders, buying different cards. The fact is there's enough digital footprints out there in the data to be able to link people together. It just takes a lot of processing power to be able to do it, and isn't something that a human can do. So what we do behind the scenes in our system is we create this continued linked profile of a consumer of every touch point that they've had with the organization. So we've got a complete diagram or a layout of everything that's happening from that individual, so that when they do try to make a claim or an appeasement or a request for an appeasement, we can understand holistically who they are, not just who are they from this one item that they're trying to deal with right now. And I guess the piece to think about here is about, well, what is the magnitude of these adjustments? Well, we all know, we all shop. They don't happen very often in a legitimate world when you're shopping yourself. You can see here over 75% of customers have got one or less post-order adjustments, right, where they've needed to call in. At the same opposite end of the scale here, you can see in that 6 and 7 plus number of adjustments, we're looking at 1.1% of customers, a very tiny amount of customers who are maybe in that area where either they're very unlucky or potentially they are fraudsters. And that's really the area that we're focusing on there. We look through those scenarios and we score those individuals to see, well, how much do we think they are potentially looking like a fraud and abuse customer? Think of a fraud score from our perspective, something akin to the FICO score that you get when you try and get a new credit card or a mortgage. We look at various aspects of what you do, how you shop, how you return, how you look to gain appeasements for damaged goods and things of that nature, to provide this recommendation back to these associates to be able to decide how they want to disposition this customer as they're coming through. The fact of the matter is, though, is that there is that element of fraudsters, and how much does that relate to? Well, from the perspective where we're talking with Dick's Sporting Goods here, we estimate that there's about $3 million in annual savings here. And think about that as being $3 million direct bottom line contribution, because it's just reshipping double product, it's effectively losing goods out of the supply chain, and it's a significant amount of money that's just leaking out of the business. But how many people do we have to go after in order to find that $3 million? We said it's that 1.1% of customers that are in the relatively risky area of the scale. Just to give you some context here, looking at the top 25 offenders alone that we have in that sort of high-risk score area, and some of the examples that Eva was showing, they represent $500,000 themselves just in those top 25. So it is a little bit trying to find a needle in a haystack because there's so many people going on. But by using artificial intelligence and the powers of machine learning, we can look for new types of fraud and new capabilities that these people are trying to do to defraud the scenarios, and hone directly in on and only affect those very, very small numbers of customers and put direct value back to the bottom line. It's do no harm for the good customers, and in fact make the good customers the process as easy and as open as possible, but being able to use technology to really ratchet down on those that don't want to play the game in the right and appropriate way. So thank you very much for your time today and for listening to us. We do have a couple of minutes left and would open the floor to questions if anybody has any. Yes. Front row. Yeah. Sure, it's a very good question. So for those that couldn't hear, the question was, for those that are in sort of the middle ground, the middle area, and they've got sort of medium score, how do you choose the break point between stepping over the line or stepping under the line? Is that a fair question? It's a very good question. And when we go through one of these implementation exercises, we pull out scenarios much like the ones that Eva proposed here. And we work that through with the business users of the business to say, how would you want to treat this customer? If you had all this information, would you want to stop this customer from being able to be able to request an appeasement? Would you want to gather more information from them? Where would you want to go? And through sort of many examples of that, we may walk through 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 examples, we start to understand where we can draw that line. And does the risk score that becomes problematic be 850 above, or is it 950 above, or where does it need to be? And that can be tuned over time to understand really what's the retailer's appetite for driving that level of guidance. Now, we clearly always have a recommendation that will come through, and I said it just a minute ago, do no harm. We never want to impact the good customers. So we may miss some of the fraudsters, but we'll get the most egregious ones because we don't want to impact a good customer ever, right? So it's not about getting fixing this problem 100%, but it's doing enough to be able to put real-world money on the bottom line. There's also a deterrence effect as well, because a lot of these fraudulent bad actors work in groups, or they've got Reddit channels or whatever else where they're sharing information. And as soon as they know they've been caught out or they know that there's monitoring going on in place, they'll typically go to another retailer and you'll see some of this activity drop down as well. So there's that piece to the puzzle as well. Gentleman two behind, purple jumper. Yeah. Yeah. There is always that. Sure, so the question was, can you take the outputs of this and then maybe advise law enforcement on doing a further inquiry? That's always a possibility, and I know our retailers work very closely with law enforcement to try and identify these types of bad actors and shut things down. So it is the ability to collate evidence, for want of a better term, and be able to provide it. The other piece where we can work on that is, let's say, somebody's complaining that the goods are being stolen off their doorstep, right? Well, that could be a legitimate theft, or it might be an illegitimate theft, right, at that point in time. So we can then work with or provide that information to law enforcement as well to say, well, is there a bigger crime problem in this area? Or if we believe that we think the person is being abusive in that scenario, we could maybe ask the customer to say, in order to get an appeasement, you need to produce a crime report. You need to go and report this to the police and say, goods were stolen off my doorstep, have a crime report, come back to us, and then we'll give you a reshipment or we'll give you some money back, right? So it just makes it one step harder. Because if somebody is being fraudulent and abusive, they're not going to go and get the police report for goods that are phantomly stolen off their porch.
Yeah, and we typically will offer, when we have a case where someone who we believe is legitimately having issues with items being stolen off their porches, to ask for an alternative address or even a signature required on a package. So we will do those steps prior to going to anything with requiring anything from law enforcement. We'll definitely err on the side of the customer first.
Any more? One more.
So obviously the first thing we check when a customer contacts us is, does the shipper have a receipt of some sort that it was delivered? And then it really comes down to the agent and the athlete having a conversation. So whether we're obligated or not, if that truly got stolen off of there and we did our best to try to deliver it and they did their best to try to receive it, and we want to retain them as a customer, we might offer them a one-time exception to ship again or ship to another address. Obviously, if someone is continually having those types of things, we're going to ask for a different address or such. But it's just really the way we're approaching it is in the best interest of that customer, because we want to retain them within our business.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you, everybody, for your time today. We'll see you on the show floor somewhere.